Stuart Bush, welcome to Fractional Frontier.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me now.
Finally, we have you here. I'll go through a quick introduction that we have for you. So, you're an entrepreneurial technology executive with years of experience launching, growing, and operating successful organizations, adept at taking companies from zero to one with exits. You're the co-founder and former CEO of Legacy League, NIL for Power 5 universities and athletes, acquired by the Players Lounge. And your expertise goes all the way from executive team leadership, software product development, financial modeling, and forecasting, which is very unique with, engineering, software engineering, and product software architecture and strategic partnerships. You're an alumnus of Yale and Berkeley, and you happen to be the first CPTO on our podcast. We've had fractional CTOs and fractional CPOs, so welcome once again. My first question for you. You founded Legacy League, which was acquired by another sports company, TPL. Are you a sports fan yourself, or was it just an opportunity you realized and created a platform for it?
So that's an interesting question. I did not play my alma mater at Yale. We did not have big college sports. I actually did crew, but my sister was the top soccer player in the country and went to the Olympics and was a professional coach. And so I had several experiences running engineering teams. I founded several companies, and the opportunity to found a company that was going to benefit from a change in the Supreme Court ruling allowing college athletes to monetize themselves was sort of how I got into the sports business. So I'm a big sports fan, but not a huge college sports fan, which is the world I'm in these days.
Okay, cool. The success of a game hinges on teamwork and synergy between the players. This is a long one, so bear with me. What interesting lessons from sports for a technical leader like yourself that might apply to improving team management and collaboration between project teams?
Well, I think the lessons of being an athlete on a team, on any sort of team, whether it's in a company or not, but the advantage of what you learn from athletes is they have to show up promptly for practice. They have to create an environment where they trust each other, and allow people to thrive in their area of expertise, whether that's whatever role they play on a team. There's also a dedication to a common goal, and I think that translates well
A
to
dedication to what, sorry?
dedication to a common goal, right?
Okay.
So that's part of what a company needs to establish is understanding and defining what level of success is important to them, and defining that clearly, even though the market change might switch. But what I have found is you can take lessons from what makes successful teams, and there's often in this environment, people are often shifting jobs. And so being able to have that culture or dedication to an understanding throughout the organization of what are our objectives, what are our goals. And so I think there's a lot of examples of athletes being more team oriented than just everybody else, right? I mean, you can build or be naturally oriented to a team goal, but some people have to develop that characteristic, that personality trait. When if you're on a team in sports, that's naturally part of your education.
Let's get more into that. So two things I heard. A, show up. B, uh, team goals. And and I guess people in sports all have to learn that they have to be a team player.
Mhm.
Um, so these two lessons. So as long as everyone's aligning towards the team goal and the team goal is also clearly defined, which is a luxury, right? especially for business problems? Like often do you feel people are generally aligned, even in leadership, in terms of what the exact goal is all the time?
No, but I think, especially in startups, you might have several founders, for example, that have different ideas of what their definition of success is, or even what the goals are or the steps to creating the different stages of product market fit and growth and metrics, right? And I think one element that my experience and my background through, I've literally worked with hundreds of private companies, which I can go in later, is helping that founder team and the executive management get aligned, and work through that with them and focus on one goal, and then effectively communicating that throughout the organization.
That's very cool. Do you have a favorite go-to exercise to get them all on the same page?
You have a secret code.
I don't
Uh,
know. Yeah.
um, yeah, I think one of the key, one of the key elements is understanding each stakeholders' perspective and walking through the pros and cons, and sometimes it really comes down to educating them on sort of basic startup or growth minded companies, what are the actual steps that you need to go through. And what I find is with a lot of startups is they have an idea and they want to build something, and they'll spend a lot of energy going down one path, and they don't, they haven't really gotten to some of the key tenets in the beginning, which is, product discovery, product market fit, product value realization. And so, walking through each of an executive team member, you know, usage or ideas of what that would be, and then trying to get alignment with them. Is there a secret sauce? No, it really comes down to, are you working with people that are open and not stubborn? Are you working with people that, want to achieve the same overall goal? And then what is the exact steps that we need to get there?
Understood. Let's talk about your experience of taking companies through exits and successful ones. Legacy League, your startup, was acquired by TPL. Um, how significant is timing when considering the trajectory of a startup? Um, and what indicators do you suggest Frac CTOs monitor to identify opportune moments for scaling or exiting or just continuing on for now?
Well, there's several elements to exits, in timing and inflection points. So there are some times when the market shifts, um, and you have to make a decision: do we pivot, or do we sell out to a company that's already sort of on the path that, um, you know, ahead of the curve of where the market has been, for one thing. I think one common element in terms of founders, in terms of exiting, is always a challenging one. Everyone has grand ideas of being the next billionaire unicorn company that will do everything. Um, but sometimes there's strategic partners that can accelerate and acquire you. Sometimes it comes down to timing in the market, for example, where you might want to take this bid, and not gamble at all on what the market might shift or change in the future. So, I think I have a lot of experience in this because my background's unusual in that, I started out as a software engineer in Silicon Valley, but then I was managing director of a large Wall Street investment bank. And so I analyzed a lot of M&A, a lot of companies private, that were VC backed, that were intending to go public at some point. And I saw that decision firsthand about the struggles that some companies go through in whether or not the timing is right, or whether or not they think they can 2, 3, 10x their valuation. So at every stage of a company's position, you have to be honest about what are the challenges ahead, what's my cash flow, what's the market, if you're VC funded, what's the market landscape. So I think it's unique for each company, um, but I think having an idea in the beginning of what is my definition of success, that can shift as the market shifts, both in financial markets, in the competitive market, and even in cash flow from a VC funding perspective.
Okay, I'm not getting more into that. Moving on to the next one for now, and then we'll come back to it. As a Frac CPTO, what types of companies do you see as an ideal fit?
So I see companies as an ideal fit where either they are, um, given my background in helping companies to define product and aligning that with what technical elements need to be developed to achieve um, their their product goals or their market goals. Um, I find that I work really well with either um, companies that are non-technical founders or companies where they've achieved some element of success and they want to go into the growth phase. And what does that look like? What kind of features do we need to do? Um, and being a fractional CPO, CTO gives you that energy to bring that a seasoned executive in, which a lot of times startups don't have, um, to guide them and to help align them for success, even if you leave the organization or stay on as an advisor. So I find that for me, the ideal landscape, given my background, is companies that are 0 to 1 or have achieved some element of success and are in the growth phase.
How do you define one? Is that a stage? Is it Series A? Is it Series B? Is it some way of measuring product market fit?
Um, yeah, I define one as you've achieved some element of product market fit, and you have um, generally some revenue coming in, right? You have proven that people are willing to pay for whatever product you've done. So that's what I view as 0 is the idea. 1 is customers are buying my product, buying my idea. Like my idea
Okay.
actually has relevance in the marketplace. And
Hmm.
then 1
Okay.
to 1 beyond is expanding upon that, whether that's features or growth or expansion across markets.
Okay. Um, so just staying on that for a bit, is it a number of customers who are buying? Does that come into play?
Well, I think that depends on the nature of the business, right? I've worked in several different industries. Sports is just my latest one, right? So I think it sort of depends on what kind of market you're doing. If it's B2C, it's a different number than if it's B2B. Um, and so, I think there's no defined number. I think it's more about like, do we have, it has to be more than one, right? It has to be like, okay, we've used this as a test case, we've proven it. All right, so now there's others out there, right? Because you can always find that one company that you're solving one particular problem for, or one consumer. That's not enough, right? You need to have a broad element of uh, product market fit for the user base. And prove that you have not just created the first user, but that there are several other users either committed or in the pipeline. You have an inbound interest in the pipeline.
You have an inbound interest. That's interesting. And so overall, it seems that your expertise is with startups with non-technical founders and companies in the growth phase. How would you delineate between these types of organizations?
Well, I think I think there's you start up with a non-technical founders, whether they are a first-time founder or a seasoned founder. Um, you know, you need to help them understand. Sometimes you need to help them understand what is the process going through for funding. What do I need? What kind of KPIs do I need to establish for my business? And how am I going to achieve that? What are the key metrics that I need to know in order to get to that next phase, right? So, I mean, you might be seed funded, you might be Series A funded, but you need to know what is it that that next stage is going to, what are they going to look for? What are those, what is that investor base, whether it's your existing investors or you're going to bring new investors in? What KPIs in your business are going to be critical for you getting to that stage? And then translating that into, what product do we need to develop, whether that's a new product or an expansion of an existing product. So I would differentiate it between the non-technical founder that just has an idea and doesn't have any idea of what to build, to the growth phase companies where they may have built something and had some success, but perhaps the code or the tech needs to be transitioned to allow more scalability or allow more expansion. And sometimes that means sort of reworking the existing code or perhaps changing the text.
Stuart, that's very interesting. So you said you sit with them, help them get to KPIs that will be needed to be hit for the next round of investment or growth, right? Where do those KPIs, so what's your personal go-to approach for learning about those KPIs? Do you start talking to investors earlier on that, hey, here's the product, here's where we are, and for what needs to happen for us to be an attractive company for you at X point? Do the
Yeah,
KPIs come from them at that time? Is it past experience? Where are you getting them from?
it's both past experience and understanding, um, talking with the existing investors in terms of like whether they're going to follow on, right?
Okay,
Um,
understood.
Clearly, there are some traditional KPIs, but they differ greatly per industry, right? So, I mean, it's different for a SaaS company versus a um, media company versus just a core tech bolt-on product, right? Um, so, I mean, going back to the question of defining what is success and what your end goals are, there are several companies out there. I've worked with several. I started out in an industry where it was software EDA. It was basically they developed software to help chip companies design chips. Right? It's kind of like an AutoCAD for chip design, and it was dominated by a few major companies. And essentially, any other company was not going to come up and really um, threaten them. Right? And so companies developed key sort of tools that would be bolt on. So that the element of success then was getting acquired by one of these companies rather than necessarily going public. So it depends on the industry. And the KPIs are going to be different depending on A, your industry, and B, really what your end goal is going to be.
And apparently, given these days, it depends on how the economy is doing too. Suddenly, all funding can dry up. uh, how do you see your role as a CPTO differ from that of a CTO or CPO purely?
Well, I think in any organizations, those two groups work
Don't
hand.
don't you feel stretched sometimes? Like these are two roles that are supposed to be fighting a bit with each other, and here I am playing both roles. Um,
Um,
is Stuart fighting with Stuart over things? Sorry, I
yeah,
digress.
basically, I think there has to be a back and forth, between the product team and the technical team in terms of uh, what's possible at what cost and what level of effort. right?
Mhm.
And so, working with that, some companies might have, you know, a certain product guy or whatever, um, and all differing elements of a technical team that they may have in place or have established. Starting from scratch, from 0 to 1 is always easier to merge those two things. But I do think even in companies that are in the growth phase, like have a Series A and are moving towards Series B, sometimes the product teams, um, they might be junior employees, junior people. I just think bringing in that seasoned executive, my goal is not necessarily to define what everything is. It's more about to give um, advice and the pros and cons of, you know, this is going to be hard to build. This is going to be easy to build. What is going to bring you the most value towards your inputs? And so helping them work through that and understanding both sides, I think is where uh, my my experience really helps. Working with a lot of different companies helps them understand and solidify. Okay, we want to go for this big product thing because we envision that that's going to bring a lot of value. The next question is going to be, what product market fit do you have, or is this a theory, right? And so um, that's a whole other question. And I think a lot of companies, especially startups, skip through the entire product market fit question.
Okay. Um, so was there something special in the background, like you opted for the CPTO role, thinking that that fits better than a pure CTO or a pure CPO? You could have.
Yes, I think so. Um, my background has traditionally been CEO of tech-based companies, where I was running the tech team, but also helping to define the product, and then growing the team out there, and eventually building out separate teams. But you have to remember that a lot of these companies, especially given the state of the VC industry these days, cash burn is a big issue, and they may not have the right people to pull on to bring on full time, from a product perspective or even from a CTO perspective. And so being able to fill those two roles, or at least advise on those two roles, I think is adds a lot of value creation and sort of a what you might say is a congruence of what are our business objectives and how are we going to align on that by giving them perspective from both ends.
Okay. And as a company, or if a company is pursuing VC funding, how does the role of a FRAC CPTO impact the investors' interests in funding the team? Um,
I do think
aren't they biased like with the FRAC? Don't they want full-time vested people with equity, especially at this level?
um, first of all, I think it depends on what the company is building, right? If it's a highly technical company, say in like AI or something very like it's a pure technical product, I think the VCs are going to lean more towards having a full-time CTO they know that are going to stay on for the long term and have expertise in that particular realm, right? Um, but I see a lot of startups that are doing marketplaces, doing various things where it's essentially you're building some sort of platform for them. And in those scenarios, I think we've seen, and I've talked to a lot of VCs who are actually interested in bringing in a fractional CPO or CTO or CPTO, because it does save the company money, and they can still achieve their goals until they prove it out. I mean, I think at some point, they're going to need a full-time person. And there's, always the option, if you're working for a particular company and you believe in the product and you believe in the team and you work well with the team, that you could opt to go full time again. I mean, at least that's my perspective.
Okay. Um, that's fair enough. Going to technical debt. Typically, there will be a lot of it when a frac CTO joins the company. How do you prioritize addressing it within the organization's development roadmap?
I'm sorry, can you help me understand that better?
So a lot of times there is a lot of technical debt that
Technical.
exists when the frac CTO joins.
Yeah.
And I was interested in your take on, how do you prioritize addressing it within the organization's development roadmap?
Mhm.
So, you're struggling with product market fit, but then there's technical debt also, and then there are stages like I think someone on these podcast series said that you're building the product thrice. First, perhaps towards that early product development, product market fit, then for some scale, and then really for like going all the way out. Um, if I recall it correctly, or perhaps it was like first you're just trying to get that investment, then you're doing the early product market fit, and then you build it out for scale. Um,
Right.
do you think similarly, or?
I do. I do. I think, uh, well, for it, I think it depends on if you are building a product in the beginning. Sometimes it's quick and dirty just to get an MVP out, right? And so by nature, you're going to have inefficiencies in the code, lack of ability to scale. And so you're going to have technical debt that will need to be addressed afterwards if you've gotten to the product market fit stage and you've actually gotten there. So I think it's important to have a team that can review the code. I can review code, and I don't write code anymore, but I can review it and understand what's not well documented. Whether we need to go back and document what the code is doing, and whether or not we need to completely shift our tech stack, or transition something to, say, a microarchitecture um, methodology. I mean, mostly MVPs are built monolithically. Um, and so understanding like what elements are we going to want to do. Um, in my teams, I always basically demand that 10% of the engineering team's time is spent towards cleaning up technical debt as we go. I think that's critical. I think technical debt is like interest; it compounds and gets more complicated. So if you're coming into a company with a lot of technical debt, the key elements is trying to figure out, um, what are the hindrances to my next stage of my next goals, right? So whether that's speed, whether that's um, scalability, expandability, whether or not I want to have products that could be split out as standalone products instead of a suite. So um, each I find each organization is different, but I do think that technical debt is important to address right up front. It's something it's part of my philosophy from the beginning.
And so what I hear from you is technical debt, address it for whatever you expect the next blocker to be as
Yes.
you grow and scale. So what you're saying is I am constraining it by just that text blocker and not thinking like, okay, what happens if you get millions of users? You're saying, okay, what happens if you get thousands, for example? That's what I hear. Okay, cool. Talking about tech stacks, please share your approach to selecting the right tech stack for a startup, considering factors like scalability, maintainability, cost, any specific lessons from your experiences, any special preferences, and why.
um, yeah, I was a um, So I think one of the key elements is understanding an organization's goals on whether they need to be, whether a mobile reactive website is enough, or whether or not they want to go an app route right off the bat. If you want to do a mobile reactive website, then what tech stack do you need to use so that when you do want to transition to an app, that the transition is easier than if you were to use a stack that has no React in it, that has no ability to uh, would have to basically be rebuilt, right? And so I do try to limit the amount of times things have to be rebuilt, but an MVP is different than when you're actually going into, user production. Um, I do believe, if at all possible, I try to use, the latest, most modern um, stacks that are out there. And sometimes that means ramping up a dev team on, the new technology because there's just constant improvements in languages and different uh, combinations of stacks. I would say the last point is understanding, you don't want to over engineer something. So understanding where some basic sort of predefined platforms exist that could do what you need to do. There's also constantly a build versus buy decision. So like in our current organization, we buy some stuff. We use open source in certain scenarios, and then we use custom. So I think understanding that dynamic is also very important guidance that you can give. Basically, the end goal is what stack, what technologies do I need to use to achieve my goals at the lowest possible cost to achieve the most value.
Okay. Okay, shifting gears. How should a frac CTO or CPTO price their time, effort? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question. I mean, I have a base rate as a consultant that can go, sort of up or down, depending. I
And I
think.
know you work 80 hours a week, so that's probably half of what you should be asking for anyway.
Well, but if you're able to work for multiple clients, it can work well. That 80 hours a week was just ingrained from my experience in investment banking. That's what you do, right? I think some of it depends on the team or the organization that you're thinking of. And if there's a good fit, like, I mean, I have, sorry for the phrase, but I have kind of a no asshole philosophy in the teams that I work with. So that's
Big
very
shout out
important.
to Bob Sutton, huh? Right here for writing the book on that.
And so I think that team fit for me personally is important. Also, it sort of depends on, uh, after talking to the founders or looking at, I mean, I've analyzed hundreds of companies around the world as, from the investment banking. So understanding like really what is the opportunity here? Is it going to be a small win? Is it going to be a lifestyle type business? Is it going to be something that really truly could be a unicorn? Is there an obvious acquirer? Understanding that means, I might potentially take equity as opposed to, a pure rate.
So
But
would you say something monthly? And is it with a certain number of hours, or you're just saying, hey, these are the outcomes I'm responsible. I'll work on that. Is it for a minimum number of months? How do you think about it? It's
um,
definitely not hourly, is what I'm hearing from you, because
um,
you're getting into equity and how promising the company is.
yeah, I don't necessarily like a, especially if you're in a 0 to 1 or growth phase. Um, I don't really like the monthly stipend because I feel like, I get called upon a lot more for expertise in areas outside of even, you have to wear many hats, right? In a startup,
Mm.
and people will come to you and say, you know, what about this investor? Can you join on this investor call? What about, even like revising my pitch deck, right? I mean, even like, so there's several elements, that, CEOs and co-founders uh, have to balance. And, oftentimes you wear many hats. And so I think an hourly rate basically makes them value your time better.
Okay, cool. That's very interesting. And so here's a fun one. What should a frac CPTO not be doing when giving time to a company?
Um, I don't think um, we should be, even if it's a startup or whatever. I think it's about limiting meetings and time for other teams in the organization in which you're not involved. So, like, I don't need to be on a marketing team call.
Okay.
I, don't need to be on the sales call. So, understanding what I should be doing in that sense. I'm also, you know, in evaluating the tech team, it sort of depends on whether they have a tech team in place. Um, and I might give you know a lot of times you can come into companies where they want to fire or hire, fire, or change their tech team personnel. I don't think it's my role to uh, go in and say like, oh, this person, he may have failed in the past, but let's, keep them. I think that's up to the organization, and it might have some element to do with personality clashes. Um, and I just don't know the history, right? And so I don't think I should be in the role of trying to convince, certain members to stay, or to try and, uh, try to um, uh, I, I do think that there's an element in some of these companies where they get into a crisis basis with cash burn because they may have overhired, and they may have onshore people on full salary that may not be sustainable. And it's my job to guide them on like, how can you achieve your next goals? Who do you want to keep? Who do you not? Who's expendable? Like, how can we replace this perhaps with another organization such as Tintash, or other places, right?
Since you are taking me there, let's talk about the importance of building strong engineering teams and how would you go about assembling and leading effective engineering teams? And I know you've worked with onshore, offshore,
Yeah,
and hybrid
I've
teams
had
perhaps too.
in-house, onshore, offshore.
Yeah, there we go.
Um, so uh, I feel it's important to bring team members together that work well together, that respect each other, that can understand when, um, you know, when they have defined, you know, projects to work on. And I think that is, um, and then evaluating them as they go, and realizing when somebody is not necessarily pulling their weight, or their work is subpar and has to be redone. Um, I personally, I mean, I'm from the, you know, I don't mind. Hmm, in my full-time roles, I'm not hesitant to fire. I'm not hesitant to replace. And, I think I have a good assessment of a tech team and how they're working together, um, and how much they're collaborating within the team itself. Um, so I do really promote, maybe not for an MVP, but once you're past that, I really do promote sort of the agile framework, and building that team, that are, yeah. One advantage, I think it's hard to always, you know, hire a full-time person for your team on your own, because You don't necessarily know, even with multiple interviews, exactly how they're performing. It goes back to sort of like the college sports thing, right? They have to show up and they have to deliver. And so, building an in-house team often is quite difficult, even when you don't when people have not worked together with that person, right? And so you're throwing in different personalities and not always knowing. I mean, I don't have time to necessarily in a startup environment, you don't have time to do like a personality traits of how they're going to fit together. That's where I think the advantage of outsourced teams, especially in the early stages, really comes in because, especially like an organization like Tintash, where they have vetted the teams, the engineers, and they know who has worked well together with each other, and can assemble sort of the key elements. Whether you start off simply with front end QA and back end, and knowing and being able to know whether or not the organization itself or someone like me can come in and sort of drive, you know, here's the product timeline, here's the task of priorities. So I think, um, especially for early teams, a lot of the temptation, especially if you get a lot of VC money up front, is to build a whole internal team when you can achieve a lot more faster with an external team, as long as you make sure it's well documented.
That's music to my ears, right? So the one thing I think I took away from my MBA was these stages of or was it Bob Sutton? Forming, storming, norming before you become a performing team. And that can take a long time. It goes back to your sports example too, right? So I think we have a lot of movies on how it takes time for people to become that right team, to come together. And yeah, that's one of the value props I like to say Tintash offers, that you get teams that can hit the ground running in terms of collaborating with each other and being at that performance stage. Speaking of Tintash, how would you recommend Tintash to, or would you recommend Tintash to other Frac CTOs? And let's say, what are the top three advantages that come to mind given your experience with us? And I'm unabashedly asking for you to
Well,
answer that.
um, since I've worked with so many outsourced teams, I think one of the big mistakes uh, founders, or and I don't know if this is your experience too, is with clients from your perspective, that come to you with somewhat of an undefined set of priorities of what they want. And then I've been with teams like this, like where we go off and you hire a team, and what they're doing is mostly, sort of out of sight. Then they're just like, giving you a monthly, you know, breakdown of here's what we've done. Like, can you approve this? Like, is this what you want? And I don't work like that, right? Like, I want to be involved and know what's going on, because I don't know if that team has the best people on there. I'm the client, I'm paying this team. I want to know, I want to see who is delivering from a team member perspective and who is not. I want to see, are they sort of going off on their own? Do they lack definition of what they're trying to achieve? And then that's my goal, is to go back from the advantage of, even if I'm not, even if the company has a full-time product person, to go back and help them revise and define what is it exactly that they should build, where should they spend time. So one of the advantages of Tintash was the willingness to work the way I work, which is, I get to see the Jira boards, like I get to see the GitHub code, I get to see all of that. It's hosted on our system, so we own it. So that, if the time comes when Tintash has successfully achieved everything that we've put out for them, then it could be easily transitioned to, and we have the revenue and scale, to an inbound team, and they can pick up where the Tintash left off. I think one of the big advantages of Tintash is in my experience, is that the quality of the engineers is exceptional. Clearly, you guys go through a very thorough vetting process. Um, and I also love um, just from my experience, what I've seen is the mentoring aspect that you bring internally. And so you are bringing in junior people and you're having your senior people teach them and bring them up so that they can eventually be the senior people. And having that cross pollination of different engineers that have worked on different types of things, I find very valuable. So for example, in our current organization, we started out one way, and then we decided we wanted to add gamification. And so, you guys have a lot of experience in gaming, and there's not a lot of organizations that do that. So as a company pivots, understanding that what Tintash is able to do and where they have expertise is an important consideration. I also find that
Thank you.
just everybody is super nice. Um, you know, very respectful. They deliver, and that's what I matters at the end.
Thank you so much. This ties in very nicely on where we started around how teams should have goals
Mhm.
and the way you work. It seems like you've tied that in very nicely. About how the way you work, how did you handle time overlap with the team here? How was the communication?
Oh, uh, yeah, I think that's an important point. I mean, uh, I when I first started working with Tintash, I was on the East Coast. Now I'm in Mountain Time Zone, so I'm 2 hours behind. Um, I find it exceptionally easy to work with them. I just dedicate my morning hours to their evening hours. Um, I find it fantastic in the sense that um, that I'm able to queue up a lot in my afternoons, and they can go off and work on it and research or give suggestions on how to implement during the day. And then when I talk to them again in the morning, there's already been a lot of work done in the background. Um, that works for me. I think it works well for a lot of U.S. companies if they can. I've even found that uh, several of your employees are willing to respond in mere middle of the night when things happen, right? So
A
if
lot
there's a
of us are
crash,
night owls, so
yeah,
a lot of us are
exactly.
night owls. Hot weather and all, so nights are better. But this is very interesting because this was the dream. The dream was, how people say being so far away, it would slow us down with communication. And my take on that is, hey, if you bring in overlap uh, towards any end of the day, uh, then you can actually move at twice the speed
Yeah,
because we can pick up wherever you left off defining something, and by the time you wake up, we've completed a cycle on that.
yeah.
So did you get a sense of that? Has that been true for you?
It's been very true. Yes, and I find that the team, from their experience, it often contributes to suggestions on, okay, these are your goals. Like this is something that we should do. Like they're actual contributors to the success of the business as
That
well.
actually goes back as kudos to you. So humans are humans, right? So if you build like yourself, you have built that human connection with people, and as you said, respect. That goes both ways, right? And trust. And if you, as the leader, you must have empowered whoever's working with you. And so they have that psychological safety and they have that empowerment to sort of contribute. And if what I hear from you, you're very nicely articulating what the goal is, then everyone knows what to run towards, right? Uh, so yeah, I would say huge kudos to you for that. That's some of the things. That's one thing I've had to share with certain customers that this is your team. They're going to really take ownership if you just treat them like your team and not just some offshore team that's going to solve like a carved out part of the problem.
I
So
think
yeah, thank you for that.
well, I think in any organization, this kind of goes back to my general rule. You have to treat people with respect, and to get respect, and to build that trust between them, because you are hiring them essentially as your team.
Trust to the trick. Absolutely, absolutely. Huge ownership that comes in. So for some teams here, I've actually had to go and tell them, hey, you can't consistently be working 60 hours a week. We can push customers back. We need to prioritize. Uh, but these people are happy doing that because they buy in to the startup's goal and they
Mhm,
get it.
mhm.
And we've been blessed by great customers too. So we have that sort of open communication set up.
Right. I
Um,
would say one last point is that there are, to overcome, some of the concerns that some, like, say, US based companies have in hiring far offshore, can be alleviated with having a US based CPO, fractional CPO or
that,
CTO.
so that's the perfect note to end on, right? So this is the next grand vision that we partner with fractional CPOs, CTOs, and CPTOs like yourself. And since say you've already worked with Tintash, right? So if you go work for a new customer now, then you can go in as the Frac CPTO who's coming in with an interim team also. So while you're really contributing at that highest level with the leadership, you have a team that can hit the ground running, build stuff out, and with time we can hand it off um, to the in-house team that grows as they get more successful, right? Um,
I
awesome.
think it's important for some companies to have that liaison, because the founder might want to ping me at 7 p.m. my time about something, and I can translate that.
Absolutely.
Right, I need to be
Absolutely.
that local liaison, because the founders are not going to work on, the same hours as the dev team, and sometimes you have to set realistic expectations.
No, no, absolutely. I think and for people in our teams, they work really well with product and technical leadership folks like you. And it also goes back to the performance stage, right? So you have to hit as a team the performance stage between the team here and the frac CTO, CPO there. Uh, that can't be a new thing and expected to hit the performance stage running either, right? So the more you have these teams who have done projects many times before, perhaps, and I look forward to doing more projects with you. That's definitely.
Likewise, Manon, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Stuart, for all the time.